batches. There were 600 or 700 in all, though some put the figure as high as 800 or 900.
Another example, that may be even more chilling, of the deleterious influence that Muhammad's example has upon the Islamic world was exemplified recently by an Egyptian leader of a radical Muslim party who wrote just recently that he couldn't believe that the beheadings in Iraq were being protested by Muslims. Weren't they aware that the Prophet Muhammad himself beheaded between 600 and 900 men personally, members of the Jewish Qurayza tribe in Arabia, after he had defeated them? Didn't they realize that if the Prophet did it, then this was the proper way to behave? And so the mujahideen in Iraq, who were beheading people, are simply obeying the example of the Prophet. Now we can see then that since the Prophet Muhammad himself participated in many battles and raids, and did indeed perpetrate these beheadings, he ordered the assassination of several of his political opponents, and he behaved in general like a typical 7th century warlord. The problem is that when this is transferred to 21st century behavior, 21st century contexts of behavior, then what you get are terrorists. The Quran occupies a place that has no parallel in Western civilization. The Quran is considered by Muslims and by traditional Islamic theology to be dictated word for word by God himself, by Allah himself, through the angel Gabriel to the Prophet Muhammad. As a result, every word of it is the words of God himself. Every word of the Quran, unless it is canceled by another section of the Quran itself, is valid for all time and cannot be questioned, cannot be reformed, cannot be changed within an Islamic context. This means that moderate Muslims, peaceful Muslims, if they are sincere, have to reject entirely Quranic literalism. But to do so puts them outside the sphere of anything that has been considered Orthodox Islam throughout history, because to do so is to reject the very basic premise of Islam, that this is a book that is dictated by God and is a perfect copy of a perfect book, the al-Kitab, the mother of the book that has existed forever with Allah in heaven.
The Noble Quran, translated with parenthetical notes by Dr. Muhammad Taqi-ud-Din al-Hilali and Dr. Muhammad Muhsin Khan. Surah 98, verse 6. Verily, those who disbelieve in the religion of Islam, the Quran and Prophet Muhammad, from among the people of the Scripture, Jews and Christians, and al-Mushrikun, other disbelievers, will abide in the fire of hell. They are the worst of creatures.
So the Quran is simply a set of direct commandments or else narratives, descriptions, sometimes very distorted descriptions of Judaism and Christianity. Because of the normative nature of those commandments, the second important body for Islamic jurisprudence and for Islamic polity is the tradition of the Prophet, the Hadith.
Now, the Hadith are absolutely necessary to make any sense of the Quran, because Allah addresses Muhammad in the Quran, and they talk about incidents in Muhammad's life, but they don't fill in the narrative details. So you have to go to the Hadith, the traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, in order to understand what's being said in the Quran and why. The Hadith are many, many volumes of traditions of the Prophet. Various Muslim scholars, beginning in the 8th century, which is some considerable time after the life of the Prophet Muhammad, who died in 632, they started to collect these traditions and to try, through various means, to winnow out the authentic ones from the inauthentic. From an Islamic standpoint, if something that Muhammad said or did is recorded in one of those books, then it has authority second only to the Quran. And in those books, there is a great deal that illuminates what the Quran says and how it is applicable to Muslims in the present.
Authoritative traditions of the Prophet Muhammad, the Hadiths of Sahih al-Bukhari, translated with parenthetical notes by Dr. Muhammad Muhsin Khan. Volume 4, Book 52, Hadith number 53. The Prophet said, "Nobody who dies and finds good from Allah in the hereafter would wish to come back to this world even if he were given the whole world and whatever is in it, except the martyr who, on seeing the superiority of martyrdom, would like to come back to the world and get killed again in Allah's cause." The Prophet said, "A single endeavor of fighting in Allah's cause in the afternoon or in the forenoon is better than all the world and whatever is in it."
Since there is no sense of natural morality in Islam, you have to go into either the Quran or the Hadith to find out what is allowed and what is not allowed.
And in those books we have very clear instructions from the Prophet Muhammad that it is the responsibility of Muslims to meet the unbelievers on the battlefield, to invite them either to accept Islam or to accept second-class dhimmi status in the Islamic State. And if they refuse both of those, then to wage war against them.
Fight against those who believe not in Allah, nor in the last day, nor forbid that which has been forbidden by Allah and His Messenger. And fight against those who acknowledge not the religion of truth, Islam, among the people of the Scripture, Jews and Christians, until they pay the jizya, the poll tax, with willing submission, and feel themselves subdued.
The Quran is broken down into two sections. One is called Makkiyah, which means what was inspired to Muhammad, the Prophet of Islam, in Mecca. And one is called Madaniyah, what was inspired to the Prophet of Islam in Medina or Yathrib. In Mecca, you find much of the peaceful verses. Muhammad used to live with the Jewish community and the Christian community in peace and harmony. So there was many verses in the Quran that even the Muslims used to worship in the direction of prayer towards Jerusalem. They saw many elements of a unity between the Jewish and the Christian and the Muslim faith.
There are indeed some verses in the Quran that could be called peaceful and tolerant. Notably the injunction against compulsion in religion. Those verses almost invariably date back to the beginnings of Muhammad's prophetic career in his native city of Mecca, where he was powerless, where he was only beginning to attract followers.
Only few relatives and friends accepted the religion at that time, and he had many foes. So the revelations of that time were very peaceful.